All right, so here is your explanation of the different forms of government. Remember that when we talk about forms of government, what we're really talking about who in a country has power, right? So when the answer is nobody, when there's no government, there's no power, this is called an anarchy. Anarchy is when there's no laws, there's no rules, there's no government. Okay, so that's your first thing. When there's no one in charge, anarchy. When there's only one person in charge, we call this an autocracy. One person has all of the power. There's a couple of different types of autocracy. We learned that when one person has power and that person is called a king, this is a type of monarchy, okay? So monarchies come in two variations. We've got an absolute monarchy, when you've got a big crown, when the king has all of the power. Okay, there's no limits on what the king can do. The king is all powerful. They have all the power. They are the king. When they die, their kid becomes the king or the queen, and that's that. There's no limits on the king's power. This is an absolute monarchy. When there are limits on the king's power, when the king has to share power with another group, or there's some sort of written constitution or something that prevents the king from doing something, this is called a limited monarchy. Okay, so rather than having a big crown, now you've got a small crown on your head. So it's a limited monarchy. Okay, sometimes called a constitutional monarchy, but it is basically when the king has to share power. All right. Now, another type of autocracy, still one person in charge, is a dictatorship. And we said this is just like your fist in the air, right? So a dictatorship is when some sort of military leader typically is in charge. They have all of the power. They make all of the rules. They have total control over the government and the citizens living in the country. Okay, so all of this is when one person has power, and this is called an autocracy. Okay, now when there's a few people that have power, we call this an oligarchy. Okay, so an example of this would be like South Africa. South Africa had an oligarchy. It was called an apartheid government, and essentially it's when only a few people in the country have power. So in the case of South Africa, 80% roughly of the population was black, and yet during this time period from like the 1940s until the early 1990s, the only people in that country who were able to do anything or have any sort of power or say in the government were the white people, okay, which made up a little bit less than 20% of the total population. This is an oligarchy because the majority of the country was not able to participate. Okay, it's only a few, so it could be based on race, it could be based on gender, only men can vote, it could be based on a religion, only a member of a particular religion can vote, it could be based on a certain amount of wealth, only people who can afford to vote, or only people who are rich or landowners or business owners can vote, okay, or participate in the government. So an oligarchy is, in essence, is when only a few people have power. Okay. Lastly, we have democracy. Democracy is when every citizen has power. Okay. Democracy is when everyone has power. Now, with democracy, it's a question of how is power used, right? So in a democracy, if every citizen gets together to vote and they vote on the laws for themselves, they make laws. There's no leaders, there's just the laws being made. This is called a direct democracy. It's when citizens gather, every citizen gets together, and they vote on all the issues. There's no leaders, there's just every citizen working together. This is a direct democracy. A representative democracy, or a republic as we call it, is when citizens choose their leaders and the leaders make the laws. The leaders make the rules. Citizens still have power because they choose who the leaders are going to be. And if the leaders don't do a good job, the citizens choose someone else, right? So this is a representative democracy. It's a direct democracy when citizens vote on the laws. A representative democracy is when citizens vote for leaders and those people make the laws. We have in the United States a representative democracy as our form of government for the country. However, states and cities oftentimes include some sort of measure of a direct democracy, whether it's through voting for laws for the state, voting for amendments to the state's constitution, or voting for different rules or things, taxes at the city level. Okay, but the main form of government for the country is a representative democracy. Okay, so no government, anarchy. One person is in charge, autocracy. A few people, oligarchy. Everybody, democracy.